I'm Fatheree.
This is Dave.
And I'm Chris.
And this is Tex-Trek. So Dave, it's been a long road.
Getting from there to here.
Yeah, but we've made it. This is the...
It's been a long road.
No, we don't need none of that.
Getting from there to here.
This is the...
It's been a long road.
Shut up!
Hey, you didn't think that was going to happen when you tried to throw me off with that.
I had a good idea it was going to happen.
But seriously, this is the fifth and final installment of Star Trek number ones, where we take a look of each premiere of each show to gauge how they stack up to Star Trek Discovery's premiere coming Sunday.
Yeah.
So less than a week away.
By the time folks are seeing this, it's going to be like a few days out probably. And shall we introduce our guest judge?
Yeah, so talking about Broken Bow, the first episode of Enterprise, with us, we have Chris here today. So Chris, go ahead and tell us how you got into Star Trek.
Well, my earliest memories of Star Trek, no.
In the womb.
Yeah. No, I actually remember watching it at my grandparents' house. Not the original series, but it was the cartoon.
Oh, the animated series.
Yeah, from the 70s. It had
Nice.
that random alien.
Now, you would not have been watching it in the 70s.
No.
Were you watching it like when Nickelodeon started rerunning it?
Did
they rerun it?
I guess
It was
so.
on, it was on like they had like a Saturday thing where I think where they showed old Saturday morning cartoons. And I think it was on that block.
Yeah. So I remember watching that, and then I remember liking it. But probably like the first thing I remember like really enjoying Star Trek was I went to the Village Cinema 4 here in town and watched Star Trek 4. Which is still
legit.
Yeah,
That was my favorite one as a kid. Might still be now.
it might still be my favorite one because it has things that I really enjoy. It has time travel and whales. I don't know.
Well, you know what? It's like it was the ultimate. The crew getting to kind of to show off. At that point, everybody like loved all the members of the crew.
Yes.
And so you got to really enjoy them as an ensemble at that point. And there were still some emotional stakes too.
Sure.
I mean, it was serious. There was serious stuff going on with Spock and all that.
There was, and I don't think I got that as a kid. I was like, why doesn't like Spock know Kirk? I was like, I didn't quite understand what was going on there. But
had you seen like Wrath of Khan or Star Trek 3?
I don't think I watched that until afterwards.
Interesting.
So I just remember watching that as a kid.
That would be slightly confusing.
Yeah, but I think...
to skip 2 and 3 and go straight to 4.
But you know, it happens all the time, basically with other franchises, and so
Yeah. And then I remember my sister getting really excited about a year later. There was going to be a new Star Trek show, and I was like, okay. So I watched it, and I really don't remember too much about Next Generation, that first season, or that first episode.
the mind can block out painful
that's
memories.
probably for the best.
Yeah, but I do remember the cool, like, Q scene where it's like the future...
Right, where like he takes him to court, basically,
it's
like a tribunal or something.
Yeah, it's like Mad Max kind of like future. So that was my earliest memory, and I, by the time I was in high school and everything, I was pretty much hooked on Next Generation, and I would like, tape the season premiere on the VCR.
Yeah. Any particular favorite episode that like just pops into your head, or favorite character or something?
Probably the one where I think maybe it was like the last Wesley Crusher episode where he and Picard crash like on a
not the last one. I guess he was leaving.
The last one
where he was on the
him
bridge.
as a regular.
Yeah, where he was a regular
in season 5.
Yep.
Where Will Wheaton had to quit working to go to college, and turned out to be a mistake.
Yeah.
College is not always the answer.
Yes. And we never heard from Will Wheaton again. So
that's right.
He's made a comeback.
Who?
It took a couple of decades, but he did it.
I believe Chris was being facetious.
Yes,
there.
facetious.
We're having worked at alongside me at the comic and game store.
Yes.
We have some awareness of Will Wheaton's presence in our culture.
Yes. So, so that's like my general Star Trek introduction, and probably.
Why'd you like that episode in particular? Was it the survivalist thing?
I think it was the survival, and it was just the fact that
I was like survivalist.
Yeah, Picard kind of needed help. And I can't. It's been a while since I've watched Next Generation, but I tend to like the Klingon episodes where Worf.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, where Worf was like, turned away. The Klingons like got rid of him, and he was like, I shouldn't do that to Worf. You know he's going to end up, just saving your butts like in a season or so.
Those were the episodes that were like, it was like they were trying real hard to make up for giving Worf the short end of the stick for like the first 2 or 3 seasons.
Yes, but he did tend to have like some of the funniest one-liners.
Yeah.
And so Worf was, well, I like all the characters pretty much, but probably like Worf and Riker.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I played trombone in high school, and Riker played trombone. I was like, I could be on a starship.
You thought you were Riker.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Well, work on his chair straddle.
I try that. I just end up hurting myself.
Oh God!
You have to be at least 6'2" to attempt that.
I was like, this was
a
really
baby chairs.
This was a really bad idea.
But that's next level Riker, isn't it?
Yes.
You've got to be an elite
Riker
to pull that off, and not everybody can immediately.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, enough about Riker and those Next Generation scrubs. We're going back. We're going back old school to before the original series.
When people wore ball caps.
Yeah, when you wore ball caps on your ships.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Like the good old days of the 22nd century.
Mm-hmm. Let's. Are you going to summarize it for us?
Yeah, I'll go through a brief summary of this episode that aired September 26, 2001.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, because it was a Wednesday 2 weeks after 9/11.
Oh, wow.
But, wow.
That's interesting. Wait,
Yeah.
it was only 2 weeks after?
Yeah.
Wow.
And they already had, like, the Taliban?
Yeah, that
guys,
was a coincidence.
Wow, that's crazy. Okay. I thought it was actually that was meant to be at least somewhat deliberately reflective.
It was.
Okay, that's some
But
fast
that
moving.
was before, like, no one thought, like, oh yeah, we're actually going to go invade Afghanistan and kill the Taliban. It was just like, yeah, like there's like
they're a threat on the radar right now. Let's see
Yeah.
what kind of stories we can tell loosely based on.
I mean, it was just in the name was kind of like the only initially in the first episode, as we'll talk about.
All right, fire away. Let's hit it.
So the episode Broken Bow opens on a boy painting a model he built, and he's quoting Zephyrin Cochrane's speech, "Where no man has gone before." Mm-hmm. This was really cool as a kid because I made Star Trek models of ships, and so it was cool to see the show start with a... Because I was like 15 when this aired, and so it was cool to see a young man...
You felt like you were a little Jonathan Archer.
Yeah, well, I was probably a little older than him, but... he's talking about Ambassador Pointy's ship and the Enterprise to his dad. His dad is building this new ship, which we'll find out is the Enterprise.
Like a real ship, not a model.
Yeah, with a new, impressive engine, and the boy, little Johnny, has some problems with the Ambassador. He calling him Ambassador Pointy, a very creative name, racial slur for Vulcans.
Yeah.
But we then cut to 30 years later, and a ship has crashed in the cornfields of Broken Bow, Oklahoma. We see a Klingon running through a cornfield while pursued by aliens discharging particle weapons. The Klingon takes cover in a silo. One of the aliens is able to flatten his body to squeeze under the door, and the aliens get in there. Klingon leaps out of the silo, rolls around on the ground, whips out his disruptor, and blows the silo up. Very dramatic explosion. Mm-hmm. And then the corn farmer confronts the Klingon, doesn't understand his Klingonese, and shoots him with a futuristic-looking shotgun.
Stands your ground laws.
We then cut to the worst opening credits sequence in Star Trek history.
Ooh. You know what? We're going to talk about that more.
It's been a long road. No, we're not doing that. Everyone fast forwards through that. That's like a universally known thing. Everyone fast forwards through the Enterprise opening sequence. The show cuts back to space, where we see Captain Jonathan Archer, now as an adult, and the engineer Trip Tucker. They're floating around a little pod looking at the Enterprise, which is finishing construction, getting prepared to launch. Trip bumps the pod they're flying around into the ship and scratches the paint.
That's why he's not the pilot.
They get a phone call from Earth that...
A phone call?
Yeah, pretty much.
Hello?
The captain is needed at Starfleet Medical immediately. So we then see Starfleet Medical in San Francisco, and there is the Klingon from the teaser is laying in a hospital bed in this compound. We have some admirals. These admirals have names like Admiral Forrest, Admiral Leonard. There's a Commander Williams.
Yeah, I missed that.
There is a Vulcan, Ambassador Savall, who we know that Jonathan Archer didn't like as a little kid.
Yeah.
There's also a Vulcan named T'Pol and a Vulcan named Tos, T-O-S.
That's interesting. And they're all kind of a little bit a-holes.
Yeah, they're all kind of a-holes. But Archer shows up, and Admiral Forrest, he's the top-ranking Starfleet admiral. He's letting him know that the Vulcans want to handle this. They have this Klingon, this alien who crashed on their planet. No one on Earth has ever seen a Klingon before. He has sustained severe injuries, and the Vulcans plan to return his corpse to the Klingon homeworld Kronos. They plan to take him off of life support. They claim that the Klingons value death and in duty, and they should just let him die and take the corpse back to Kronos.
Right.
And it doesn't sit well with Captain Archer. He says, no, this happened on our soil. We don't need to listen to these Vulcans. They've been holding us back. My dad was trying to build the Warp 5 engine. He died before he could see the ship launch. I can take the ship. I can take this man back to his homeworld alive. And the Admiral is convinced. The Vulcans don't like it. But Captain Archer promises that he'd have the ship ready to go in 3 days.
Right. And they make a point that he is not... It's otherwise was not quite ready to roll. He's going to have to, hustle his ass to make it work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the Admiral tells Archer, don't screw this up.
Right. Clearly a lot riding on it.
Yes.
There's literally their first major, fast warp drive ship.
Warp 4.5 in
4.5,
3 days or whatever.
And then they've got this, precarious thing with the Klingons, who are a warlike race. And the Vulcans are all watching them angrily.
We then cut to the Enterprise and meet the helmsman, Travis Mayweather, and the tactical officer, Malcolm Reed. Trip is on board. They're all preparing the ship for launch. We also learned that the transporter on the show is a new piece of technology that a lot of people aren't comfortable with using. We see Brazil, where we meet Hoshi Sato teaching a Vulcan language class. Mm-hmm. And Archer shows up to recruit her, and she's going to be the communications officer. The Vulcans agree to give Enterprise star charts so they can reach Kronos, but they have a condition with that. They have to send one of their own. So they send the Vulcan T'Pol, female Vulcan that we saw earlier in the episode. So Trip and Archer meet T'Pol, and she comes off as
Quickly and condescending.
Yeah.
So like a Vulcan.
Yeah. Although I will say
worse than your typical Vulcan.
The show did take a very deliberate decision to amplify the Vulcans' paternalism.
Yes.
With this series, and we'll talk about it more in depth, I'm sure.
Sure.
But it was definitely a thing.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't even like the dog, though. Porthos.
Because of the sense of smell.
Yeah,
thing.
Is that, by the way, a thing, or did they just kind of throw it in that scene?
The Vulcan females have a heightened sense of smell.
Yeah,
that was never brought up before this episode of Enterprise.
I assumed it was kind of there just to show that Captain Archer kind of was being a little belligerent about having the dog around her. Mm-hmm.
But
that's what we call a microaggression, by the way.
Microaggression.
I'm just saying.
Microaggression.
But, if you can't get along with, that cute beagle, then the problem's with you.
Could she give it, the Vulcan neck pinch and, knock it out?
I think so.
Put it to sleep.
Spock gave the Vulcan neck pinch to a horse in Star Trek 5.
Yeah?
On Nimbus 3.
I completely forgot that, but okay.
Wow.
I guess you could do it to a dog.
Yeah, okay. Noted for the future.
But we then get the ship launched. Admiral Forrest plays footage of Zephyrin Cochrane giving the speech from the commencement of the Warp 5 complex. This engine will let us go boldly where no man has gone before. I hate that. He should say boldly go, because I don't care about grammar.
The slight tweak to it is Proper grammar. It's probably this is probably a case where Star Trek's tradition is so drummed into our head that it would be. They should have let it stand.
Yes.
And here's my
On
thing.
the other hand,
on it.
I kind of don't care. It doesn't bother me.
I think they wanted to change it intentionally because TOS said to boldly go where no man has gone before. Next Generation updated it to where no one has gone before.
Yeah.
And so with Enterprise, they were probably thinking, well, we need to make it something a little different. Why don't we just fix the grammar?
Where none of my dogs have been before.
It's true. That's probably Porthos. I'm sure is the first Earth dog to go many of the places where he went. So as the ship is preparing to take off from dry dock, Archer has a flashback to when he was a little kid building his model ship with his dad, and he says to the helmsman Travis, "Take her out, Mr. Mayweather, straight and steady." And the ship warps out of the Sol system. We then cut to this strange alien helix made up of a lot of small little pods joined together in this strange atmosphere just floating there. And one of the aliens from the opening that we saw chasing the Klingon is in this room talking to a mysterious figure kind of being projected in like a hologram. They discuss what happened with the Klingon Kling, and the alien asks the mysterious figure if he can prevent the death of the soldiers that were pursuing Kling, implying there was some type of time alteration shit going down.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, on Enterprise, Dr. Phlox, who we saw, this alien doctor tending to the Klingon in the Starfleet medical compound, he's tagged along. He seems to like humans. He thinks they're kind of quaint and interesting.
He sort of seems perpetually bemused.
Yeah, and he has a very interesting sick bay full of strange creatures. Maybe, possibly, it would fall under the definition of alternative medicine.
Yes.
Except this actually seems to work.
Right.
But, they have Klang on board. Phlox is tending to him. And we also learn that Phlox really likes humans because he loves Chinese food.
Right.
Travis and Trip are hanging out in the sweet spot of the ship where you can hang out on the ceiling, basically. The part where the gravity plating is weird.
I thought it was a neat idea.
That was actually something that they intended to use a lot, but then they found out it was such a pain in the ass to get the actors
to fake 0G.
Yeah, and it was just they
I did actually wonder, did they actually do that vomit comet plane that lets them do that, or was it all just like ropes?
No, I'm sure it's just like with ropes.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
And really, all you'd have to do is like show them like get up there. After that, you can just like shoot them with the camera upside down.
Yeah. Do close-ups, but anyway, they decided not to do.
We learned a little bit more about the characters. We learned Travis is a space boomer. He's the first generation of humans born in space. His family had a cargo ship.
So he's been around.
Yeah, he's been around space more than typical humans at this point, even Starfleet officers. They reuse a joke from Aliens about the movie Aliens, about three-breasted aliens.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
We have T'Pol having dinner with Trip and Archer, and she's eating a vegetarian option while Trip and Archer eat these really delicious-looking giant steaks with baked potatoes. And
she gets the last laugh. She cuts her breadstick with her fork and knife.
Yes.
But we established that humans have transcended things like war and disease and poverty, and T'Pol still thinks of them as somewhat primitive.
Right. She does say, she's like, how can you think of yourself as advanced when you're still consuming dead animals or whatever? And Archer's attitude is sort of, we're getting there. It's not going to happen overnight. We hit the big stuff.
And then the ship is continuing on its way to the Klingon homeworld Kronos, and Klang regains consciousness. The Klingon Klang.
Oh yeah.
He's speaking gibberish though. Even it's in Klingon, but it still doesn't make sense. Hoshi can't translate it. And suddenly, Enterprise is forced out of warp and starts losing power.
Yeah.
And the creepy aliens we've seen earlier in the episode are sneaking on board, crawling
Super
on the
cool
walls and ceilings.
Scene.
Yes.
And you have this cool shot of like what they're seeing with their infrared vision. And
they're like scuttling along the walls like bugs.
Yeah, and this is where we hear Klang call them Sulaban. When they get into sickbay, they start fighting with Archer and one of these red shirt security guards that are in there. Archer's able to shoot one of them dead, but another one escapes with Klang. Power has been restored, but the Klingon is gone. So later on the bridge, T'Pol says to Archer they should return to Earth. The mission is a failure, but he's determined to find Kling. He pulls her aside into his ready room and vents all of his frustrations towards Vulcans and her, possibly unfairly, but
Right.
he explains, his dad, Henry Archer, never got to see his engine utilized. He died just wanting to let's try out this engine, see if we can actually go warp 5. He spent like his whole life just angry at Vulcans not letting humans go and accomplish the
Is the notion that the Vulcans held out on technology that could have helped them? Like, why didn't you give us the tech? Or that they were like saying, rules of space travel are such that you can't go warping around like maniacs.
Well, it's implied that the Vulcans weren't giving them much help. Maybe occasionally would, but also like Vulcans would be advising them not to do this.
Right.
Like,
it's sort of like being on the other edge of the Prime Directive, being the planet that that can't get the full help because they're too primitive.
Yes, like the Vulcans were like, you're not ready for what's out there, so we're not going to give you this technology.
Yeah, and Archer's tired of being held back, humanity being held back by Vulcans. He feels that the humanity is, unable to progress because of Vulcan interference. Dr. Phlox is in sickbay performing an autopsy on the dead Suliban that Archer shot and discovers that he's received abilities from advanced genetic enhancements. T'Pol and Trip have investigated some of these sensor logs. They detected something before they lost power, and possibly might be able to track some ships down. Apparently, Klang had been to the Rigel system right before he came to Earth, and the humans weren't told that initially by the Vulcans when they recovered the sensor log from that ship. They're just now learning this.
Right, the Vulcans are holding out.
Yeah, so frustrated Archer decides, okay, well, let's go to Rigel 10. It would have been nice if y'all told us that earlier. So we cut back to the Suliban Helix, where Klang is being interrogated under the influence of some type of truth serum. He confesses that he went to Rigel 10 to meet with a Suliban female named Saren and was supposed to receive a message, but he didn't actually get anything from her. He has nothing to deliver. Back on Enterprise, the crew prepare for a landing mission on Rigel 10. T'Pol informs the members of the landing party that Dr. Phlox recommends they don't make any intimate contact on the planet. Like, I'm not sure why...
No shore leave fooling around.
Yeah, I don't know why you'd have to warn people of that. Like, what does Phlox think about humans? If he's like, I better bring this up, they might get STDs. Anyways, they land on this dark, snowy planet, Rigel 10, and they're in some kind of strange industrial marketplace where the Coors Light twins are doing bad sexy dancing and eating butterflies with frog tongues.
Yes, that was just strange.
T'Pol is asking around and finds out that there is an enclave where Klingons are known to hang out and eat live food. Archer and Hoshi proceed to that area, but they're grabbed up by these hooded Sulibans. The Sulibans have also captured T'Pol and Trip, and Archer meets this Suliban female Saren that we heard Kling mention earlier. And she approaches him in the form of a human female and asks what Archer's doing with Kling. He explains they simply want to take him home. Saren kisses Archer and then turns into her natural Suliban form, which kind of freaks Archer out.
His line, what is he like? He's like, that's never happened before.
Yeah.
It was actually a pretty good line.
Yes.
And nicely, dryly delivered.
But she explains that she was a part of the Suliban Cabal, where they received genetic enhancements as payment. They're soldiers fighting for a faction in a temporal Cold War. They're taking orders from the future. And she has the ability to, I guess, tell if someone's being honest or not by touching them, and that's why she decided to kiss Archer.
Sure.
Yeah,
it's like how Starfire and Teen Titans would kiss people to learn what their different languages and stuff. Actually, in that, they always made the point, she didn't have to, that was just her preferred method.
Apparently, Saren and Starfire have that in common.
Yep.
But she explains to Archer that the Suliban Cabal, they've been staging these attacks to make it look like different Klingon factions are attacking each other, and they're trying to instigate a Klingon civil war. And Klang is secretly carrying proof back to the Klingon High Council. She asks Archer if her Suliban here on Rigel 10 can go with them to get Klang, help them look for him and get them to Kronos. But then suddenly they're attacked by the Cabal Sulibans, and she is shot and killed. and dies asking Archer to find Klang, get him to Kronos. Archer, Hoshi, Trip, and T'Pol make their way back to Travis and Reed on the shuttle pod. And the captain is wounded trying to get T'Pol on board, and he's been shot in the leg. Passes out on the shuttle pod. While they're returning up to Enterprise, T'Pol claims she's taking command of Enterprise, and unconscious Archer dreams of flying his model ship with his dad on the beach, and it crashes in the sand. His dad's telling him, "You can't be afraid of the wind." Back on the ship, Trip and T'Pol are required to sexually rub gel on each other in the decontamination chamber.
Maybe one of the most forced acts of forced attempts by Star Trek to sexy it up.
Yeah, they don't have decontamination showers in the future.
At the same time, I can't deny the power of her nipples. Well, what is funny though, of course, about that whole scene is they make a point. They're very businesslike about it.
It's true.
They're rubbing each other down, but kind of arguing the whole time.
Yeah, but there are little moments where they kind of pause what they're saying. It's they can't resist. There's implied
a little bit of magnetism.
Sexual attraction,
right?
Overlapping the dramatic tension as they're arguing. And actually, there's a later episode where Trip mentions we actually meets T'Pol's mom, and she asks, how long have you been in love with my daughter? And he says, I guess I knew it the first time we argued. So I think he was actually talking about this moment.
That's pretty funny. But by the way, cosplay ideas for both of them. I don't know if anybody's ever done that. You gotta
rubbing gel
greased up in your underwear for both Trip and T'Pol cosplayers.
And that's a really good gel too.
Consider it, cosplayers, if you haven't already done it.
It'd be easy to do, but They are arguing about, T'Pol is taking over command of Enterprise. Trip is saying how, it's going to be important that you don't make us end the mission, you don't return us to Earth. This is really important to the captain. He just wants to see this through. His dad was the same way. He wanted to test out his engine, and you people didn't even give him a chance to fail. He died not seeing his engine tested. Don't do the same thing to his son. We get to sickbay where Archer's leg injury has been healed by Phlox's eel.
Yeah. More eel treatments.
T'Pol and Trip show up, and they inform Archer that they have modified the sensors to track the Suliban warp trail. They've identified the plasma decay or whatever technobabble, and they're in pursuit of the ship. Archer is impressed that T'Pol chose to continue the mission instead of returning to Earth. Mm-hmm. So Enterprise tracks the ship to a Class 7 gas giant, and with some more sensor modifications from T'Pol, the crew sees that multiple Suliban ships have entered the gas giant recently. Archer orders weapons to be charged and hull plating polarized. They're going into the gas giant. And this is where the Suliban helix is, and we see the mysterious shadowy figure who we can now conclude is a guy from the future. Mm-hmm. Everyone calls him Future Guy, which actually started immediately after this episode aired. People were calling him Future Guy on the internet. But he orders the Suliban leader, Silic, to stop the humans. They can't be allowed to interfere with what he intends to do with the Klingon Empire and start this Klingon Civil War. So Enterprise descends into the gas giant. They pass through a few different levels. They enter a level of liquid phosphorus. And under that layer...
look a little bit like the Mutara Nebula for a little while. Not exactly, but you get rid of it. It's gaseous.
Yes.
Yeah. Under the layer of the liquid phosphorus is where the Suliban helix is. And they capture one of the little Suliban pod ships with their cool grappler. I love that idea that they didn't have a tractor beam. This is before that. They have an actual physical grappler that has to go and hook onto something and reel it back in. So they capture one of those pods. The pilot ejects himself, but they bring it on board. And Lieutenant Reed gives Archer a device to knock out the magnetic locks on the helix and make all the little Suliban pods disconnect and break up their giant helix. He also gives them the new experimental weapon, the phase pistol. Mm-hmm. Which is cool because it has a stun feature and a kill feature.
Well, don't get those mixed up.
Trip and Archer pilot the captured pod down to the Suliban helix and dock with it. Trip still, as he's docking, if you notice, he still bumps into it and probably scratches some more paint.
It was a nice little callback.
Crap-ass pilot.
That's why he's an engineer.
They get on board the helix and they proceed through some dark corridors. They test out the stun feature, finds out it works on a Suliban that tries to confront them. They finally reach the interrogation room that Klang is locked up in. They remove him from the restraints. He's not too cooperative at first, but finally agrees to leave with them and even helps them fight their way out. Archer arms the anti-maglock device as Trip and Klang get on the pod. The Helix pods all start to disconnect from the device, and Archer orders Trip to take Klang back to the ship. He says, "You can come back and get the Klingon out of here." So Enterprise is up in the liquid phosphorus level. They're having to move around to avoid these depth charges that are being shot up into their level of the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Trip can't find them, but Hoshi uses her magic ear on the communications station. She can hear this faint transmission, and so they're able to get Trip and Klang back on board. Archer's still walking around the Helix, and he makes his way into the room where you go to talk to Future Guy.
Yeah.
And Silik is in there. This is where we see Silik and Archer kind of confront each other. Silik tells him, just go, just leave. And this is a special effect that didn't really work, where he shoots the phase pistol at Archer, but Archer spins out of the way. The idea is that this future room has kind of a reverse echo, where you see and hear something right before you see and hear it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Archer saw the beam coming before the beam was coming.
It almost looks like it strikes him, but it's that was just the little primer laser or whatever.
What it was supposed to be was he was, because in that room it's a reverse echo. You see the echo before the event happens.
Right.
Yes.
So he saw the beam coming before the beam was coming.
Right.
But
he gets out of the way, and then there's this weird backwash effect.
Yeah, it's very kind of Matrixy a little bit.
I have to say, it does look pretty neat, but I was did they say what I'm supposed to be seeing here?
It was a total Brannon Braga idea that sounds cool on paper, but the execution didn't really work.
It didn't sell the concept.
I think it would work actually in if it was in a novel in prose where
right, where you knew
you
sort of what technically was going on, yeah.
But so anyways, they start fighting each other, rolling around, fighting over the phase pistol, and we see this cool thing that Silik does with his hand as him and Archer are still fighting over the phase pistol, where he can roll his hand around,
not unlike a bit of
arm.
a T-1000 thing, but it seems like they're not quite that. He can't just completely morph, but he can bend his bones and kind of reverse things.
It was neat, something we hadn't really seen before, especially in Star Trek. But Silik grabs the phase pistol, and as he's about to shoot Archer, he's beamed out back to the Enterprise.
Right, first use of the transporter technology on a person.
Well,
that we know.
Canonically, it's probably
field.
not, but yeah, this is the first time that Archer had probably ever been beamed, and the first time that the NX-01 Enterprise had used this transporter on a person. Then we get to Kronos. Finally, the Klingons are in the council chamber shouting at each other, and Hoshi, Archer, T'Pol, and Klang walk in. The Klingons see Klang. One of them grabs a knife, slices open his hand, gets a little bit of blood in a vial, puts it in the computer, and they see that there is actually a message encoded on Klang's DNA.
Yeah.
And so the
Very
Klingons now have their proof that the Suliban were staging attacks. The appears to be the Klingon leader, says something to Archer. We don't know what it is, but we know it's not thank you.
It might end in you.
We get back to Enterprise, the captain's ready room. Archer is talking to Trip and T'Pol, tells them that Admiral Forrest is pleased with the results of the mission and has ordered them to remain in space and go out and explore. Archer says he was wrong about T'Pol. He says that I had some preconceived notions that I need to get over, and I couldn't have done this without you. And T'Pol's like, I know. But he says that, it might be good if you stayed on board and served as science officer. But then he's like, I don't want to sound like a little bitch and ask the Vulcans, can I please have her as a science officer? So could you ask for me?
Yes, yeah.
And she's like, yeah, I can ask.
I don't think you used that exact terminology, but that was the implication.
Yes.
Paraphrasing. But she agrees to stay, and Archer steps out onto the bridge, orders Travis to set a course to a nearby unexplored world. Travis mentions there's an ion storm on the way, but Archer tells him, can't be afraid of the wind.
Well,
take us to Warp 4, and we end on little kid Johnny and his daddy flying his model ship.
Right, even as we know it has come to fruition in the present.
So, that was the first episode of Star Trek Enterprise. Chris, what do you think about that episode?
It's my favorite pilot of all the Star Trek shows.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, every time I watch it, I get really I'm gonna watch all of Enterprise now, and then
you do. You watch every
time.
All 98 episodes.
Yes, is it 98 episodes? Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe something closer to 20 or 30, and then you're.
Yeah. So, but no, I like a lot of things in it. I like the chemistry between Trip and T'Pol and Archer. I like all just their little moments they have together. So.
Having the a dinner together.
Yes.
Is both kind of it's another one of those down to earth things.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also a good place for them to. They can A, do exposition, and B, do character conflict and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I completely agree.
And they do a lot of those dinner scenes throughout the entire course of the show.
They do, yeah.
I think that was a good thing that they threw in right from the beginning.
Yeah, and another thing is just cool aliens. Works.
Suliban were among the cooler threat aliens that we'd seen in a while.
Yeah, and they set off at the very beginning. One of them kind of shrinks down and goes underneath a door.
Right, it's
which
he
was really
flattens
cool.
himself.
And then we have cool Klingon moments where he the very beginning just blows up the silo or whatever. So
yeah. He got to do the leap away from the explosion in slow motion.
He did.
Yeah. It's a full-on action hero thing.
It was pretty awesome. And
considering that ultimately that scene was about him getting shot, he got to be a badass beforehand.
He did, yeah. And one of the main things I just like about the pilot is there's a mystery, and they give us enough that we're still kind of interested, but we still don't know future guy. So there's a lot going on that I enjoyed, and there's some cool action. There's some failed sexiness that just kind of feels a little out of place. But overall, I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Dave, what did you think?
It is also among my favorite of the pilots. I remember liking it right out of the gate when it came out. But I also, that was at a time when I think I didn't have a lot of patience necessarily for Trek, and so I probably only watched, I'm going to say a season and a half before I kind of just fell away from keeping up with it. I don't know what was going on in 2005, but I was busy or something. 2006 then? I don't know.
It ended in 2005.
Oh, okay, so 2001. Actually, I would very, very honestly, I would have been setting up the store right in those days, and so there's a good reason why I might have been busy. But anyway, rewatching it, one of the things that struck me is that it's not Encounter at Farpoint and some of the other ones are, I think, a little bit trying to push, certainly Deep Space Nine to the sort of the science fiction notions of Star Trek. They have the somewhat loftier notions. Where I think Enterprise particularly is effective is it's more like the movies tend to be, where it's like a compelling sort of suspense and action drama. It's more emotional, it's a little heavy-handed, but Archer has a very clear-cut emotional arc. He has to get over his issues with the Vulcans. T'Pol has to kind of learn to trust the humans and back their plays. There's some great action sequences throughout, starting with the Klingon one, great infiltration sequence, pretty cool shootout on whatever that icy planet was.
Rigel 10.
On Rigel 10. And a good action sequence at the end with a little bit of weird time blurring stuff. So I feel like it really works strongly on a gut level, even if it's not necessarily pushing the science fiction boundaries.
Yeah, and
what about you,
I'm going to bounce off of that and say it is very cinematic.
Right.
Yes.
It's one of the most cinematic episodes of Star Trek.
Generally speaking, don't you think maybe stronger action than they had traditionally had?
Yeah, they were definitely going for that. This was after Rick Berman had been working in the 24th century with Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager for 14 years consecutively. And so this is going to be a major departure at the time when they go back to what you often refer the rough and tumble Kirk era, even though this is before Kirk. But they wanted to they wanted to get into
key off of that
type of stuff, and
right.
Having more action was going to be part of that. I remember reading interviews with Rick Berman and Brandon Braga, that summer leading up to the September premiere online, and they said, this captain, he might be a little bit more likely to drop kick someone, pull out the phasers than Picard or anyone else.
I actually remember throughout the first season, Archer kind of got his butt kicked a lot.
He did, yeah.
But he was also a little quick. He's kind of quick to anger at times. Not a hothead per se, but he could get riled up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one of my big problems with Enterprise is that over the course of the show, I think he's written very inconsistently.
Mm-hmm.
And
do you think it's sort of like what they wanted to emphasize at any moment he became?
Yeah, like sometimes they try to make him into like a big badass, and then sometimes he comes off as like kind of dumb. He doesn't he gets fooled or something, and I think it was an interesting character that they created specifically for Scott Bakula. He's the only time the captain didn't have to audition. They
built a show around him.
Yeah, they wrote the character for him, and I think a big part of that was just his presence on Quantum Leap is where most people knew him, and there are some similarities to what's the name of the character? Sam.
Sam. Yeah.
Sam. What's his last name?
Beckett.
Yeah, Sam Beckett.
Yeah.
I've never seen an episode of Quantum Leap.
Well,
okay.
He's kind of a similar character though. He kind of has this naive curiosity, and I think that kind of really worked for Archer with the the story they were telling. Like, this is humanity's first time going out into space, and
you think having a little naivete was in the humans was kind of a good representation of that.
Yeah, like when he says like, "Well, I hope we never have to use the phasers again."
Very
the
ironically,
phase cannons or whatever.
Like, here's hoping that's the last fight we get into.
Yeah.
Well, and the humans, they're also like for like the first half of the pilot, they're like, we can handle it, and they get to that kind of ice planet, and they're all like wide-eyed, like, what's going on? So
right. They even make a point that when Trip is about to go and interfere, there's like a mother using a little breather unit on her like infant kid, or it seems like it's mother. And but the kid is coughing and looks all desperate, and it seems like she's holding back the respirator. And Trip is like, he's like a concerned parent at Walmart. He's like, I'm gonna go give that guy some what for, or that mom some what for. And then T'Pol is like, chill your ass out. This is how their species acclimates to like a non-methane atmosphere. It's got to happen, and this is normal thing. And she's like, you need to learn when to interfere and when not to.
Yeah.
Which is interesting thematically. If you broadly take the Federation as an analog to America, or to thinking about any sort of global interference, global adventurism. It's an interesting point. Maybe the Vulcans were right to hold out a little bit on technology. It is interesting to see the flip side of that, because usually you see these cultures and you're like, man, the Federation does not need to go get in there and give them technology because they're going to just use it to amp their war effort or whatever. Yeah. And they do. Archer does make the point that they've stopped war. They seem to have resolved the major crises of Earth and come back from a global devastation to do that. But to stick up for the paternalistic Vulcans, it might have been reasonable for them to give us a little bit of a waiting period before they gave us all the tech.
And that was another neat idea, was that they wanted to show humanity, definitely had made progress towards that idealistic Gene Roddenberry Picard era, future human utopia. But they weren't quite there. And they also did like the same thing with the Vulcans. The Vulcans weren't quite the noble species we had seen.
Right.
If anything, they were more similar to the TOS Vulcans, where Spock would occasionally be condescending to humans, or Sarek of Vulcan was kind of condescending to non-Vulcans.
Right.
They kind of really dialed that up as, okay, if we're going to take them earlier than that and see them where they're even less evolved.
It's probably a little bit of a stretch to have merely 10 years before Kirk that the Vulcans were fairly notably culturally different. You would think that would change over a span
This is 110 years before Kirk.
Oh wait, is it that far?
Yeah.
God, I forgot. It's the new show, of course. That's only 10 years. I forgot it was that much. Okay.
Yeah, this is in the year 2151.
Criticism rescinded. That's yeah. But broadly speaking, you would expect that culture to change, especially over centuries, especially with, as they note, a long-lived race like the Vulcans. Archer makes an interesting point at some point. He's like, "You guys live 200 years. We don't. We don't have time to sit around and wait."
Yeah.
Yeah.
They reminded me a little bit of the sort of like the way Tolkien's elves are. They're essentially immortal, so they take a fairly laid back, chill view of global Middle Earth politics most of the time, except when they're pushed. And it seems like they were running the Vulcans a little bit like that.
Sure. And I kind of like to have it with like humanity having a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. Mm-hmm. Like, we're going to go explore, and it just, I don't know, kind of reminded me of kind of the 1960s, kind of like, we're going to go to the moon, kind of space race.
Yeah, that was definitely a big inspiration for Star Trek in the 60s. That was part of the zeitgeist.
And is visually referenced during the beautiful song that opens every single episode.
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's not a beautiful song, though.
So
let's talk about that.
Let's do it. Let's
talk about this. Yes.
All right. I'm gonna say it's more of a guilty pleasure than anything else. I'm gonna allow it's a super hokey song, but there's something about it where I actually do usually watch it when it comes on. I think it's the imagery of 60s and 70s era NASA space exploration merged with the song. It's a catchy enough little folksy kind of
Have you ever heard the
song.
original like Rod Stewart version? You might not. You actually might not like it as much if you're so attached to this.
Was it actually a Rod Stewart song?
This was a Rod Stewart song on the soundtrack to the Robin Williams movie Patch Adams.
Interesting.
Wow.
You're saying that, and it's ringing a bell now. I knew, in the back of my head, I remembered it was a Rod Stewart song, and it sounds like the kind of ballads he did, which I consider like, there's Rod Stewart of the 70s where he's like his songs are all kind of tawdry sex songs.
Yes.
And then like in the 80s and 90s, he kind of veered into adult contemporary.
Yeah.
And this is I won't lie, it's a kind of soft rocky adult contemporary song. It's like if you liked Phil Collins in the 90s and all that.
You
stuff.
like music that doesn't have any balls to it, then listen to this.
Yeah. You're such a tough guy with the music.
Yeah, well, no. When I was listening to it, I was like, "Is that Rod Stewart?" And I was like, "It sounds kind of like a Rod Stewart wannabe."
A cover.
Yeah.
But
I like seeing that transition.
The images are good,
right? They take they run a transition from 60s era exploration to Zefram Cochrane's first ship to do warp to with some space shuttle stuff in between. Sure. And eventually to the present Enterprise, the NX-01.
Yeah.
And I think we can all agree on that. I'm not going to necessarily try and win anybody over on the song. I'm just saying I'm a dissenter, and I'd like to hear from all the audience members who are dissenters too.
But
we're going to go listen to some soft rock together. We're going to listen to some Hall & Oates. It's going to be a good time.
No, you could have had like all that cool imagery and all the emotion that comes with that without that song. And a big reason why people hate it is it's not like the quality of the song is irrelevant. It could be like the best
they wanted
song
orchestral.
ever. Yeah, but the people wanted orchestral.
Jerry Goldsmith.
This was a really weird thing with Enterprise where they were deliberately saying, we're going to do things very differently this time. Mm-hmm. And I think it was after 14 years, we did Next Generation was basically kind of the same premise as the original series. You're on the Enterprise exploring space. Mm-hmm. DS9, let's stick people in one spot on a space station. Voyager, let's strand them on the other end of the galaxy. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, what else can we do? And they're like, let's get out of this time period. Let's really shake things up. Let's not even put Star Trek in the name of the show. For a while, the show was just called Enterprise, not Star Trek Enterprise.
Right.
Interesting.
There's something like after the ratings were dropping, like the network was like, no, like we need to brand this as Star Trek.
People need to know it's Star Trek.
Then let's get rid of like the orchestral opening. Let's do like something completely different. Let's have like this cool montage. Let's put some hip music that the kids are into. And, it was just a lot of the stuff that they did to change things didn't work. We were talking about the sleazy attempts to sex things up.
Right.
I can't remember if it was Berman or Braga. I think it was Rick Berman. But in one interview I read online that year, he said, we're going to push the envelope as far as sex on TV goes with this show.
Yeah.
And it just comes off as just like kind of desperate. It's like,
right. In anime, it's what they call fan service. The cheesy panty shots and stuff like that in anime. I'll say this. I feel like that the basic concept of that scene, characters undergoing decontamination and kind of having a spat / kind of bonding a little bit on some level, that's an interesting enough idea. Had they been just on sort of two MRI type tables next to each other with little thing going over them or whatever, you probably could have accomplished the same thing. You didn't necessarily had to have them lather up.
Yeah.
At the same time, I do think Trek could use some sexiness. That was just the most awkward way to do it.
Sure.
And kind of childish.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Was there anything else, any other complaints that y'all had with this episode specifically?
I got one, but you go ahead, Chris.
I'm trying to think specifically. Not really, mate. One thing that I just thought was kind of cool was kind of the depth chargy things when they were shooting at the ship and they couldn't see it. I don't know. It just reminded me of some of submarine movies.
As Fatheree knows, that's my favorite brand of Star Trek space battle. Is the occasional episodes that feel more like naval combat.
Yeah. So
yeah.
You need to play the
Bridge
VR game
or whatever.
Yes,
Yeah.
because that's
really?
the vibe. That's a mission in there.
Oh, nice.
The submarine-y type things, I like that. I don't want them to overuse that.
Sure.
Speaking of submarines, kind of the design of the NX-01 Enterprise, if we're going to talk about the production design for a little bit, it was kind of submarine-ish, how everything is kind of cramped. There's low ceilings, there's a few windows.
I suppose the coloration is that kind of dark metallic gray or silver, I guess. It's not quite the brighter, the pristine white, the NASA white of Kirk's ship, or Picard's, or even Voyager was Voyager grayish, or was it also kind of
it's the same colors?
Yeah, I was just trying to picture it for a second.
It was very workmanlike.
So it had more of it looked slightly more warlike in those colors, or at least it did not seem so NASA.
I think it looked more low tech.
Right,
was what they were going with, and
right. Which more nuts and bolts. You see guns that pop out, not phasers that are just housed interiorly, in the most of the versions what we've seen. So guns pop out, cables fire off. It's more manual, more practical, I guess.
Yeah.
And so with the design of the show, Herman Zimmerman had the task of, okay, well, you need to make it look less advanced than the original series, but more advanced than today.
Right.
Good luck. They
They
did a good job.
I think they did a pretty good job.
Yeah, overall, yeah.
Because it really feels...
And the new show is, Discovery is having to do some of those same difficulties.
With Enterprise, though, I think it was a wise choice that they made it a little closer to a contemporary aircraft carrier or some other naval ship than the 1701 Enterprise.
Right.
But they did still have things that felt high tech, especially in 2001 when flat screen displays were still new.
Right.
I remember reading in one of the Star Trek magazines that they were going to have these. They just bought a whole bunch of plasma screens that they were going to put all over the bridge, and I was like, oh yeah, that sounds cool. And back when that felt like a high tech piece of equipment.
It is going to be weird. The closer we get to Star Trek in real life, the more it's going to probably feel the way Buck Rogers felt us growing up with, weird rockets with fins all over them and, space more is like an ether than real space. It's going to start to feel weird. But right now, there's been a limited enough space travel that it still feels proper and future-y.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not that worried about that because I'm... expecting that I'll die before the 2160s when we're supposed to make first contact with the Vulcans, and that's when everything's supposed to really start changing.
Right.
So
before the Khan's...
well, no, this would be after Khan.
The
eugenics war already happened. That was in the 90s.
Oh, that's right. It was kind of stealthy the way it happened.
Yeah, we just weren't paying attention.
Yes.
But...
I've got to say, get out my anger over something in this episode, though.
Oh, okay.
It's actually two characters that I don't like. Mayweather.
I wanted to guess which two.
Sorry, guess the other one.
Reed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they're both weak characters.
I was gonna say Hoshi and Reed. I actually like.
She's got something going on. She's more interesting.
I used to really dislike Mayweather. But then rewatching Enterprise, For some reason, I've watched Enterprise twice within the last 14 months.
Like a watch through of the whole show.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the last 14 months, I've seen all 98 episodes twice.
That's hardcore.
Wow.
Just I didn't plan that out. This is the way it happened. But I actually like Travis when they give him something to do, and the actor who plays Anthony Montgomery is really good. But there's just so many episodes where they didn't give him anything to do.
He felt sort of awkwardly, doofusly enthusiastic to me. Now, that said, I agree. I felt like his concept was a very strong concept. I think that, you mentioned giving him something to do. I think if he was, like, always busting out knowledge that he knew, like, it was like, they'd be, like, they had their official star charts, but he'd, like, know all the secrets and stuff. Oh, there's actually a warp lane that you can travel through where you can go faster, if you take this route, but it's going to shake up your ship. He would know little bits and pieces of lore about various alien races that people wouldn't.
And they do that a little bit, but not often enough.
It's always weird to me, like, because that's like how do you build the character as that, and then sometimes it's only like in the first few episodes or the first season that you kind of remember that stuff. I do agree that, like, say in the Next Generation, Geordi was like, his visor was meant to be a big thing. But that's not a lot of storytelling possibilities. Basically, he can sometimes see particles other people can't. That's about it. Yeah. But here you've got a guy who actually has a pretty diverse a background that can apply to a diverse variety of dramatic situations. So I felt like he was underused. Malcolm, it's Malcolm, right?
Yeah,
Malcolm
he's stuffy and boring.
He's like a cold fish who's kind of cynical, right?
Yeah.
He's your typical, like, Hollywood version of an Englishman.
Yeah,
he's just like he's stuffy but proper, but awkward around women.
Right.
Yes, I feel like when they were writing his character, he's British, and they didn't get much further than that.
Yeah, those are the two.
And they actually use him a lot. Like, there are a bunch of opportunities where they could have done stuff with him, because he gets a lot of screen time in the show. Mm-hmm. The only time they make him interesting is in season 4, which is where everything gets awesome.
More interesting.
When they bring in some Section 31 stuff.
Oh, right.
But if we're going to talk about characters, let's talk about the big three.
Yep.
The Enterprise trifecta.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy to talk about these characters. But Chris, let's hear what are your thoughts on the big three?
I like them. They seem to you kind of got the buddies with what's Archer and
Trip?
Trip, yes, Trip.
When we were talking the other day about things we want to see in Discovery, one of my entries was I wanted to see some best friends. Mm-hmm. And that is for sure the case with these two guys.
Sure. And I liked it was just like a little something, but when he scratches the paint in the first one, and then again they're like in a life and death situation, and he kind of does the same thing.
Yeah.
And he just kind of like smirks at each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Little
things like that.
Trip looks at him like, "Come on, give me a break."
Yeah. It's like
cut a guy some slack.
Yeah. So I like that,
but not like, "Oh, please don't have me, thrown out of the Federation."
Yeah.
He's like, you know how it is.
Yeah. And then T'Pol, really, I don't know. She starts out as kind of stuffy Vulcan,
cold fish.
Yeah, and then she surprises Archer, and they're like, oh, well, maybe there's hope for our relationship and all that, which kind of culminates at the end.
Right.
And I just like the dinner scene. It's really well done. The characters complement each other, and it reminded me of my favorite things about Spock and McCoy and Kirk. So.
Fatheree, did you feel that she was like a good representation for Vulcans, or?
I have a lot of problems with the character T'Pol.
What's that?
Really?
Yeah. But just to keep it like on this episode, I think it was kind of too much like Kirk, McCoy, Spock. We're gonna have she's gonna be second in command, and she's also the science officer,
right?
And she's not gonna get along with this country boy Trip from the south,
right?
And I felt like it was too much like
a
return.
It was too much.
It was the Force Awakens.
Yeah, and
running too many traditional notes there.
But I mean, they were definitely trying to get more into that TOS style vibe, but
which I remember, by the way, as you know. Wasn't always a fan of Next Generation. By the time this came along, I was warming to it. but this was definitely felt like a slice of more of what I wanted.
Because you have those fireworks that you talk
Yep.
about sometimes.
Yep.
And that is, exciting drama. But it's always like the same arguments where it's always like,
Right.
DePaul's just like, well, no, it's logical to do this.
Yes.
And then
Right.
Trip just like starts
It's
yelling.
somewhat it's pretty tropey territory.
Yes.
I could argue that the sort of the reconciliation is even somewhat trite. But like I say, I think it kind of works on a gut level. You want to see the two characters that hate each other learn to like each other and all that stuff.
But
Jolene Blaylock, the actress playing her, I think does a good job. But there is something about her delivery. It feels like she speaks a little too slowly to me.
Very deliberate.
It's a little, but it doesn't have the. It didn't have the sort of crisp precision, I guess, of maybe Sarek.
Okay.
And it bothered me a bit.
So the thing with that, and with casting her,
I was trying to figure out if they were trying to make it so she was quasi-sexy while she was being...
this Enterprise premiered, immediately following the end of Star Trek Voyager.
Yes.
The last episode of Voyager aired in May. First episode of Enterprise aired in September. Okay, at this time in 2001, 7 of 9 was like the most popular new thing in Star Trek for a long time. Like the last time they had like a new character that was like that well loved was probably Data.
Yeah.
And they really wanted to make another 7 of 9. And I think that was probably like a big inspiration of why they wanted to sex up the show. They had tried to sex up Voyager. It kind of worked. I mean, 7 of 9 was a great character.
Right. Beyond just the chick in a cat suit appeal that she ended up developing to a very strong
character. There was more to her than just, catering to the male audience.
Yes.
This is funny, but I just completed watching all of Star Trek with my girlfriend who's seen it all for the first time. For some reason, she never liked the Borg. She thought Best of Both Worlds wasn't that great because she didn't like the Borg. She thinks they're boring villains. Because there's no personality to them.
Right.
She's like, they're just like super overpowered threats with no personality.
Right. It's sort of like Terminators writ large.
And so she didn't know anything about Star Trek or what was going to happen in later shows or anything. And when we get to 7 of 9 coming on board Voyager, I told her, like, okay, so this Borg is going to become not only a regular character of the show, but pretty much the main character of the show for the remaining seasons.
Yeah.
And they definitely wanted her to be a sexy babe in a skin-tight suit, but she's actually a compelling character, and you're going to like her, and you're going to like stories about her. And she was like, no, that sounds terrible. And then she was like, oh, actually, yeah, like she's like one of the best characters in Star Trek.
Yeah, she is.
So they wanted to recreate that, and it didn't work with T'Pol. And Jolene Blaylock, the actress, she has a lot of problems with the way the character is treated on the show, the way she was treated. And they did weird stuff with her in later episodes. They kind of made up for it in season 4, like I say, when everything on Enterprise got good. And it's a shame we didn't get seasons 5, 6, and 7.
Yeah.
But just like on this episode, I think she just kind of comes off as like too cold and kind of. It doesn't make sense why she's all of a sudden decides to be so cooperative and so helpful.
Right. Well, actually, prior to the captain finding out that she ended up, while he was in sickbay, kind of following what he wanted to do while she was acting commander, it didn't seem like she was going to. So her swerve didn't make a lot of dramatic sense. Did she say exactly why she chose to do it?
No.
No, I thought she was like just like, oh well, the captain was going to do this, so.
And anticipating the captain's commands is part of the job of the first officer.
Yes.
It was if she was finding a logical way to explain what was probably actually an emotional decision.
Yes.
She decided to trust him, but that's how she had to explain it logically.
Yeah, when she decided not to discontinue the mission.
Right.
When he was like, as acting captain, you could have done whatever the hell you wanted.
Right.
But, I don't have a problem with that.
That's a decent explanation.
What I have a problem with is when he says, will you stay on board as a science officer, and she agrees to. Like, I don't really. They should have given her some type of motivation there right off the bat. Like, I don't know. Maybe.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, don't they kind of want her to spy on them early on? That's a big thing. Like in the first season, like off and on, is like, do they find out that she's reporting back periodically?
That still doesn't. Well, that's not quite how it played out.
Yeah.
But yeah, even if that had been the case, it doesn't make sense because that doesn't line with. Well, the admiral says, "Let's continue our mission." Now,
Right.
Phlox will want to stay. Do you want to stay, please? Like,
Right. You know, it would have been interesting to have somebody who was a little bit of offered some more insight into her, like somebody who she bonded with, like say she and Phlox got along particularly well for whatever reason, and she could, literally exposition style explain, like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but like a part of me, like admired what he was able to accomplish, and I feel like he actually needs the guidance of logic because he strays too far into emotion. Like, give you some sense of like what compelled her to do it.
but they didn't have that,
Right, they didn't have
and
that.
that's the problem.
Yeah, I agree. It's if you if you look at it kind of with any real sense of logic, it falls down a little bit. That's why I do think the episode sort of mostly works on an emotional level.
Yeah.
But I do overall like the episode. It is definitely one of the better Star Trek premiere episodes. And I think we can all agree that we like it. It had a few missteps. Like
Yeah.
with the forced sexy stuff, which is probably why T'Pol wanted to stay on Enterprise, is she really liked Trip rubbing the gel on her.
It was the gel.
Yeah.
Well,
It's like, if I can get that again.
that's right.
That's.
Oh, one last thing about characters, though. How great is Phlox?
I really like him.
Yes.
He was his perpetual bemusement and the way he kind of delivers his lines. I really like it.
And he was unique. I remember going into the shows wondering, is he going to be like the Doctor from Voyager? Is he going to be like Neelix? What's this guy going to be like? And it was John Billingsley. From the first episode, he knew how to play this guy, and it was something
Right out of the gate.
It was something different from any. He wasn't Odo. He wasn't Worf. He wasn't any of the previous Star Trek aliens.
Yes.
It was his own entity.
I would also just real quick mention a few setting things that I liked. I like seeing Earth. We talked about that. We see a glimpse of Brazil that has
It's a cool classroom.
Right, it's like they're doing an outdoor class thing, but you do see some like sort of high techy cityscape stuff behind them.
It was
But
very
clearly-
Roddenberry.
Yeah,
Yes.
but clearly with lots of forest and stuff around them, I really like the. I'm gonna blank on it again. What's the name of the planet? The icy one.
Rigel 10. It's part of the Rigel system.
Yes.
Whatever.
Like half the planets in Star Trek are in the Rigel system. They go there all the time or mention it all the time.
I
That's
thought
the same system where Captain Pike fought that Genghis Khan looking guy. Not the same planet, but the same system.
That's minutia to me. But I thought that looked actually really cool. I liked seeing them at a place that was a little bit more rough and tumble. Anybody
Cool.
out there who's played Mass Effect, the asteroid city that's like this sort of big den of crime, Omega, it reminded me a bit of that on a slightly dingier scale. I like the idea of all these sub levels and different areas for different aliens, dangerous things that can happen below decks. Reminded me a little Babylon 5, I suppose.
Yeah.
And then I also thought the sort of the gaseous planet showdown was a cool thing too, with the different strata of gas clouds.
The layers,
the
the
little hiding places.
gas giant lasagna.
That's right. That's gross, but yes, it's an accurate
That's
description.
accurate. Yeah.
And the station that was made up of all the bonded
The Helix.
things, of all the bonded ships.
Those are all like
Although-
neat sci-fi Brandon Braga ideas that he's good with coming up with stuff like that.
Admittedly, though, you probably really wouldn't want a station where if somebody had like one clever device, they could uncouple every section of it all at once, which is what happens. But it looked neat. It was cool.
Yeah.
So I liked seeing all these different vistas and stuff.
So, any final thoughts? We'll start with Chris. Anything else you'd like to add?
I think I pretty much touched on everything. What Dave mentioned, the kind of the seedy underbelly of that station, I thought it was kind of cool because up until that point they had just kind of met the Vulcans and maybe it was like
It made the galaxy feel bigger.
Yes, yeah, and there was all sorts of, you had like just like the cool little scene with Trip and the kid they were weaning like him onto like oxygen or whatever, just like stuff like that where you think maybe humanity's not ready for this. So it was good to show that, hey, maybe the Vulcans weren't completely in the wrong.
Right. I actually thought they probably could have pushed that a little bit further. But the sympathy of the show was clearly with Archer and being held back. But yeah, it was neat to see that.
Yeah.
So, Dave, any final thoughts?
When we were talking about the core characters earlier, I want to say I actually right out of the gate super liked Trip.
Yes.
He was actually he's my
He's
favorite
the most
character on the
popular
show.
Enterprise character.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
I super like him. He's like a laid back Dr. McCoy.
Yeah.
He seems kind of chill.
And I found him relatable because I've always wanted a Texan to be in Star Trek, by the way, and they never said what state he was in this first episode.
Yep.
So, leading into the show, I was really hoping he'd be from Texas, because all they said was he was from the South.
Right.
And Texas has been very underrepresented in Star Trek. It's not that big of a deal. I still have my relatable characters they've always been Bones, and Trip was always where I saw myself in Star Trek, because they were the country boy from the South on the starship, and they're also both kind of
assholes.
not assholes, but
Oh, sorry.
we state our opinions and
Yes. Yeah. They're forthright Southerners.
forthright.
That's
right.
It's a good way of putting
see how
it.
I politically. That's because I'm Troy. I
Fair
mend the things.
But I love Trip and I love Phlox, but yeah, some of the other characters do fall a little flat, and a lot of it was just in the writing. I think the actors are pretty good,
Right.
but even Archer I felt is written a little inconsistently. But yeah, this as far as this pilot goes, you do see Hoshi doing cool stuff.
Yeah.
I sort of felt like everybody was very kind of active. Yeah, they were they're solving mysteries, the part where they scan and find all the debris wake or whatever of the Suliban ships that lead them down into the gas giant and all that. There was a lot of figuring out of things, and it wasn't all just technobabble. Basically, that was a scene that was about figuring, cleverly finding the trail.
Yeah. It felt kind of Next Generation-y.
Right. And
Yes.
I can understand, even if they're using some little, there is some technobabble in there, but I understand the idea of cleverly finding a trail.
Sure.
Well, go ahead. You finish
Did you have any more final thoughts?
The temporal Cold War.
Yes.
Oh yeah, we didn't talk about that at all.
I immediately thought it was a neat idea in there, even though I was like, Star Trek needs to lay off the time travel. I think even then I was probably thinking
They do it so good though.
I think
I say it should be a
Star Trek and time
a
travel.
requirement. Do at least one time travel story every season.
Yes.
I saw a friend of mine, I think this was not on our Tex-Trek comments, but a friend of mine talking about it and saying on another Facebook thread somewhere, saying that the reason he could never get into Star Trek was the time travel. And I think it was one of those, he has the thing where either time travel is impossible, or if you do it too much, it's ridiculous. For whatever reason, that was his thing. He's like, I can't watch Star Trek because the time travel is stupid.
Yeah. I bet he loves Doctor Who.
But yeah, Star Trek does use it pretty well. I mean, it's a lot of their best stories have time travel in it. Literally the most original series episode, probably the most popular Next Generation movie has heavy time travel. It's a thing.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of a temporal Cold War just as a catchphrase. That's a neat idea.
It is,
The implication of a simmering war is cool. Do we ever find out why they wanted Klingon Civil War? I mean, it clearly could destabilize a lot of things and change.
Yeah, they never touch on that again, but they kind of they didn't have the temporal Cold War really plotted out that well, and they kind of abandon it, and then they come back and wrap it up.
Cylon style.
But,
they have a plan.
It
sounds like the kind of thing that would be a handy MacGuffin, where it's whatever events they're trying to manipulate in the future, any given plot that we want to have happen can be something that the Suliban need done so that things happen the way they want in the future.
Yeah.
So you could just really say anything. And that's kind of clever, but the danger is, it becomes meandering and you don't feel like there's a consistent thread to it.
But the idea of the temporal civil war was kind of to make the show kind of not feel as prequel-ish. You could still have some stuff that ties into future Star Trek. And Brandon Braga has confessed that the original idea was that the future guy would be revealed to be Captain Archer.
Oh,
and
weird.
I don't know how that was supposed to work, and what if there was a plan, what that plan would have been. But he said we didn't do that, but that was my That was my big plan, and I remember seeing rumors on the internet that
that sounds exactly like the kind of big plot twist that happened near the end of Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
Well, there were people on the internet saying like they thought that the future guy was a Romulan, and Brandon
To me,
Braga.
it sounded like the Vulcan ambassador guy. It's
You thought he could have
it's in
been
his
Saval?
vocal range. Yeah.
Well, Brandon Braga said, and this was like years after it was canceled. He said like, I planted rumors that he was going to be a Romulan, but that was a red herring, and that was actually like I remember like reading those rumors. So
oh, interesting.
But
so I guess their disinformation campaign worked.
yeah,
So I never finished the series. Do they actually reveal who Future Guy is at some point?
no, but they end the temporal Cold War. The temporal Cold War ends.
Okay.
What season?
4.
Okay, so it's the finale of the
If
show.
you watch the episode after the episode you just watched, it has the end of it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. This is the one where there's
Where they're fighting Nazis in World War II
Yeah.
in New York with the mafia. That's cool.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, you should just skip the season. Everyone skip to season 4.
That also sounds
that's
very-
my final thought. No, my final thought on this episode is that it was at that time I thought it was like the coolest premiere for a Star Trek show. It got me really excited, and I wish that the rest of the first 2 seasons
lived up.
had lived up to. And I mean, I know it's hard to do it. You can't make this big cinematic story every episode. You can't have this much action. You can't have the special effects of the gas giant. But
Right.
there was a bunch of good ideas. And the other thing about Brandon Braga, he wanted to take a year off and kind of plot out the show. And UPN said, no, we need Star Trek back on the air in the fall. You got to fill that Voyager slot with something. If Rick
So they
Berman
had a
and you
crunch.
won't do this, we'll get someone else to make a Star Trek show.
Mm-hmm.
That came from Paramount.
Wow.
Well, Paramount and UPN were kind of the same entity, but that was...
Yeah.
Anyways, I think if Brandon Braga had a little bit more time to plot it out, and I also think if he had a guy like Ron Moore, or, they eventually got Manny Koto, but a writer who was like really in tune with the original series and that era, because Brandon Braga was a Next Generation Voyager writer, and he didn't have that
love for it.
connection to
Yeah.
the original series. So if they would have had that and had a little bit more time to plot things out, I think they could have done some really cool stuff. But it was a good premiere episode. I liked it. Dave, we'll have to rank our premiere episodes now that we've discussed them all.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
But I think that's about to do it. And next time we will be talking about the premiere episode of Star Trek Discovery.
It's gonna be crazy, man.
So yeah, that
Awesome.
The show is coming out Sunday, and we're pretty hyped about it. You will soon hear our thoughts on it.
It's been a long road.
It's been a long road getting from there to here.
I knew I'd get you to sing it. Victory is mine.
It's been a long time, but Discovery's time is near.
That's right.
So that'll be next installment of Tex-Trek, and until then,
live
long and prosper, y'all. Thank all of you so much for checking out this installment of Tex-Trek. I hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure to like our YouTube videos and subscribe to our channel. Audio-only version of episodes are available at our website, www.tex-trek.com. Please check out our site, especially if you just want an audio-only podcast. We have that available for you. Y'all can also keep up with us online. You can follow us on Twitter, @TXTrek, or you can check us out on Facebook at www.facebook.com/tex-trek. Please, by all means, let us know what you think by dropping a comment anywhere you see fit. We definitely want to hear your feedback. Let us know what you liked and what you would like to see more of, what you would like to see differently going forward. If you want to email me directly, go ahead. I can be reached at fathereeactual@tex-trek.com. Thank all y'all again. Take care.